Everybody, how are you?
Awake.
You're awake? I don't know if I'm awake. I'm also having ear issues, so I can't really hear very well out of this ear. So if you have any questions, speak up. There'll be time for questions at the end, but if you have a burning desire that you just don't understand something I said, feel free to raise your hand. And there will be audience participation. So, hello and welcome. My name is not legally yet this, but soon it will be Mary Sebastian Stroh. My pronouns are they, them. And my current favorite board game is probably Betrayal at House on the Hill. My fiance and I have been playing it a lot because I introduced it to them, and they're like, oh my god, I love this game. I currently work at Marikey, which is a local company that does a lot of social services work. I'm a family-based therapist. So the client is our kid, but we work with the families too. I have a master's in social work, bachelor's in theater, and I'm currently working on a postgraduate certificate in expressive arts therapies at Millersville. I'm also taking all of the Bodhana group's trainings so that I can become a certified board game therapist person. Today, we will be discussing challenging behavior. Oh, no. Oops. We will be discussing expressive arts. Sorry. Challenging behaviors is tomorrow. Expressive arts and therapeutic tabletop gameplay. It's a winning combination. So our learning goals today. Number 1, you will be able to describe the differences between expressive arts and creative arts. 2, you will be able to name 3 ways to incorporate expressive arts into tabletop gaming. 3, you will be able to describe the clinical concerns a little bit of the arts being incorporated into tabletop gaming. And there'll be a couple of short participatory exercises. And you will all get an F if I don't see you participating. So, does anybody want to take a stab at what expressive arts therapies are? It's totally fine if you get it completely wrong.
When the expressive art versus creative art would maybe be when you're not making something, but when you're saying or doing something to express emotion rather than making like an artifact or object.
I like that definition. It wasn't quite what I was looking for. Anybody else before I change the slide? Oh, what was your name? Justin said that maybe expressive arts is more expressing as opposed to creative arts is creating, which makes a lot of sense because of the words. So, expressive arts therapies is multimodal. That's an important word. I want you to remember multimodal. It's a multimodal approach to therapy that can include many different types of arts therapies, arts plural. So here's some examples. It's not all of the expressive arts therapies that there are in the world. Typically, expressive arts therapies uses more than one approach at a time. We have drama therapy, music therapy, art therapy, filmmaking, animal-assisted therapy. Ecotherapy is going outside, looking at trees. I mean, it's more than that, but I'm not an ecotherapist, so. Movement therapy or dance therapy. Somatics is an important one that not everyone knows. Soma is Latin, I believe, for body. So somatics is therapeutic work related to the body. And it can be different than movement therapy. If you imagine like mindfulness and sitting and doing a body scan and how does my head feel and how does my neck feel. That's kind of like somatics. And then sand tray, if no one is familiar with sand tray, it's a tray of sand and you put miniatures in it. Kind of similar to drama therapy in the sense that it's like pretend play, but on a smaller scale. And then the diamond is everything else, because expressive arts therapy includes a huge amount of different modalities. I had a hard time making this a shorter presentation. So if I'm talking fast, it's because I had a lot in here. Gardening, equine therapy are all examples. So here is the difference between creative arts and expressive arts. So expressive arts is multimodal. Creative arts is more individual. So an example of a creative art could be if I was sitting with a client with a guitar singing a song, and that was all that I did. But expressive arts would be, say that we then decided, well, we're going to create a dance to go with that song. And then not only were we doing the music, we were also doing the dance part together. So it combines these different things. Often these lines are blurred. Years ago when I was first learning about this and Googling stuff, I had a hard time telling the difference because they're very similar. So today we are going to be playing a game. Big surprise! You get 1 point for one correct answer, you get 3 points for 2 correct answers, and if you get it wrong, you have a bomb and you blow up. So feel free to write down your answers and your score if you would like. It's up to you, or you can just keep track of it in your head. First, though, it's dangerous to go alone, so I need you to take this. We are going to talk briefly about the Bodhana group's, what do you call them? Lists of skills that individuals are working on when playing tabletop games and role-playing games. Dexterity, empathy, initiative, resiliency, creativity, critical thinking, education, and social skills. So dexterity and empathy are first. And I want to highlight these skills, number one, because this is Save Against Fear. It's the Bodhana group. This is important stuff. And show how they kind of connect up with expressive arts therapies and how we can utilize expressive arts therapies to improve these skills and build upon the aspects of tabletop gaming already in place. Hawk is for dexterity. So y'all are kind of spread out, but if you wouldn't mind finding a partner really quick, and for about 60 seconds, I want you to share with each other different ways that you can think of dexterity happening in board games. Go. Thirty seconds. All right, if y'all could wrap up. I will continue on. Does anybody have any examples they wanted to share really quick? Does anybody have examples that they would like to share about how dexterity can be used? What did y'all talk about? Jenga, that's a good one. That would be a different thing, although good question. I heard my mother talking about dice, which is a good one.
If you think about it, playing card games, physical dexterity.
That's perfect, and it leads into Happy Salmon, which is on the board up there.
There's some bigger too, like burritos and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. So obviously, yeah, throwing dice, playing cards, that's some little stuff that you get in just about every game. But there are games specifically that do work on dexterity. Happy Salmon is one version of a bunch of different games. I think the original card game was like Slapjack. But it's this idea of slapping cards down. And there's some bird or flamingo game, I think, where you flip it up and you have to catch it. I haven't played Happy Salmon, but it looked like you are slapping cards. Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza is another one where you slap cards. Did you have... Oh, Pop and Popcorn! Yes! Yeah, Hungry. There's a lot. Exactly. And a lot of these, you're like, well, these are for kids, but you can probably think of a lot of different populations that any of y'all work with that could benefit from some of these. Rampage, I also haven't played, but both of these are on the Bodhana website, so I figured I'd put them here. I think Rampage, you're dropping something on top of a city.
Yeah, you drop things on the city, and you also blow things into the city. There's
Perfect.
Things that happen.
Like you literally blow with your mouth?
Yeah, you literally.
That's cool. I had a client one time who's very young, nonverbal autistic, but he completely understood what I was saying. And I wanted to teach him breathing exercises for stress relief. But I made it a game, so we stacked up these blocks, and then I had him blow them over, and he thought it was the best thing in the world. But if I had been like, now take a deep breath in, he'd have been like, what? I'm 3, what are you talking about? Some other ideas under, like, movement therapy, placement of board pieces, where are you placing them, how far do you have to reach? Larger pieces for occupational therapy can sometimes be helpful, especially, like, when you're really, really little, you're working on pincher grasp. So a 3-year-old might not be able to pick up a small piece, but if you have a big giant house for settlers, that works. Placement of players around the table. Human-sized board. I would love to have a human-sized board for a Robo Rally and dress up as the robot and then have, go around. So players moving themselves, too. I can imagine if you have cerebral palsy and you have challenges with movement, moving yourself as the robot or whatever. Moving on to empathy. I want you all, for this one, take a moment, take a deep breath and close your eyes. And I want you to think of a time when you played with someone that you felt a lot of empathy for. Maybe they were sad because they were losing. Maybe someone took their train section and took a ride. Maybe they struggled to understand the game rules. What was that like for you? What feelings did you have during that experience? And if anybody has any feelings that have popped up for them that you would like to share, feel free to just call them out.
Suck it up.
Suck it up? All right.
I had a thing where I was DMing a game and one of the players, like maybe 30 or 40 minutes in, but one of the players just was like, I'm having a hard time. I just can't play.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to play, but you have to just hang out.
Have you, sorry to cut you off. Have you ever had an experience similar to that personally? And you can just say yes or no.
Yeah.
And I ask that because I feel like empathy is important when we talk about perspective taking. And if anyone here works with the neurodivergent or autistic communities, perspective taking is a big thing there of sometimes autistic individuals struggle to understand what someone else's lived experience is. But you can get that a lot in board games and especially role-playing games. Literally, you're playing a role. So theater improv, you may be in a group therapy setting where you have one member take on the role of another member's abusive family member, for example. So say I'm the client and you are the other client and you take on the role of a family member of mine. Now, obviously that's helpful for me as the client because I'm able to talk with this person that I had challenges with, but it's not really them. But it could also be helpful for the other client because if this is a group therapy session where everyone has similar struggles, you might be like, whoa, I'm playing this quote unquote villain. What's that like to play a villain? Hanabi is an interesting one that I put on here because I've only played it once and it confused me at first, of course. but it was on the Bodhana's website because your cards are faced out. You don't see your cards, and the other people have to help you figure out what cards you have. It's a team game, which can be great for empathy and getting along and all those skill building. And I saw it on there. I'm like, I gotta play this again because it was good. Also, there are theater improv games. I have a theater improv background that are similar to Hanabi. I worked at the Renaissance Fair for 5 years, and I also was at Hack. And both places, they had a similar game that they played. At Hack, we had characters, and I think there's also a game that Ellen DeGeneres plays where you have a famous person on your head, and the other people see it, but you can't, and they have to give you clues about what it was. I played that at Hack, which is kind of similar to this, but even better, at the Renaissance Fair, this is Renaissance time. So if I'm a peasant, I have to bow really, really low to the queen. So we got playing cards, and everyone had a playing card on their head. And obviously, if you were a 2, you were going to be low to the ground. But if you had the queen card, you'd be up. Thing was, you didn't know what your card was. So you would have to, all right, I see this person as a queen, so I know no matter what my card is, I'm going to be bowing at least somewhat. And after 20 minutes, you'd get a kind of good idea of, oh, all right, most people are bowing to me. I'm probably one of the royal court. Or if everyone's like, you're scum, I'm like, well, I'm probably the 2. The theater improv games? They were just improv. I don't know if they had a specific name. They probably do. You might be able to Google what I described. So the next 2 are initiative and critical thinking. Critical thinking is obviously a big one. You know, you think about playing board games and it's like chess, critical thinking. We can all think of board games that work on that skill. So I'm not really going to talk too much about it, but Carcassonne, obviously, and Boop is one of my new favorites. I just learned how to play it and then immediately went out and bought it. And I also want Boop, or Spooky Boop, because it's for Halloween. Initiative. Initiative, I think, is also really important, but it's not always something people think about. I would like all of you to repeat after me. I welcome challenges. I grow by playing new games. I can win any game if I work hard enough. Good job. Initiative is the idea of battling this voice in your head that says you're not good enough. So I put positive affirmation board game on here. It's crazy putting together a presentation like this. You just Google stuff and there it is. And you're like, thanks, internet. Winning a challenging game can give somebody a lot of self-esteem, especially if you're a little kid and you're struggling with these board game skills. And then eventually you get it and you're like, I won against my father. I can't believe it. That's so cool. You can work on confidence through gaming. You can gain new ideas and you can find personal growth. Self-esteem is always a huge thing that I work on with clients as a therapist because it seems like there's such a lack of it in our society, unfortunately. Resiliency is on the next page, and I wanted to put that with initiative because I think they kind of go together a little bit. Like, if initiative is the ability to get up off the couch after someone's pushed you down, resiliency is getting back up again and again and again. Does anybody know what a roguelike video game is? I see a lot of head nods. So for anybody that doesn't, and you can correct me if I get this completely wrong, people that are nodding their head, but I believe there was a game called Rogue, or roguelike, or I know there's roguelike and roguelite, which confuses me as well. And Rogue, you had permadeath. So you're going along in the video game, and if you die, you die. You go all the way back to the beginning. I'm playing a game called Spelunky right now that I really love. I hated it at first because you go back to the beginning when you die. But that can really help you with resiliency, and you're going all the way back to the beginning. Are you going to have the ability to try again and keep going? It can be very frustrating. Imagine the Groundhog Day movie. I'm doing a I'm going to be DMing a game with a couple of other people where we've decided to do Dragons at Tea, which I will get to in a second.
2 minutes, about a second.
No, that's fine. Anyway, actually, yeah, close your ears for one more second. We were thinking of doing a Groundhog Day scenario, and yes, she's in the same group, but she'll be a player, so I realized can't tell her what's going on. I guess she heard Dragons at Tea, but anyway, yeah. I won't say anymore because I can't. You're good. But also imagining learning a dance, learning to play an instrument, script for a play. If you don't have the ability to be resilient and continue to learn that song, even if your voice teacher's like, well, you suck, you gotta keep trying, you're never gonna get there. I also found One Deck Dungeon, another game I want to play. I've not been playing all these good games that apparently is a roguelike. So that looks cool. Education, that's another low-hanging fruit. Of course, board games do education. I was homeschooled, and my dad had, like, every room of our house, except for the bathroom, had board games in it. So I definitely feel like board games were part of my education. I would also encourage you with education to think outside of the box. Haha. There's literally a game on any subject. I learned that growing up. I put on here Lovesick because my fiance, among other things in their job, is a STI tester. And also because their community supports service, they have an LGBTQ board game group at the Alder Health Services where they work. So Lovesick is about STIs, and I'm pretty sure you're passing around STIs, but if you have a condom, you're safe. And I think there's other things too that keep you safe. And I thought, what a great game. I should tell my fiance, hey, take this to work and play this with people. So not only it's board game night and it's fun, but you're like, hey, safe sex. And that's just an example of like thinking outside of the box. Also, there's a lot of different party games, obviously. I think the more Euro game community kind of dunks on party games a little bit. I know I have. But there's a lot of those that can work on creativity and add in those expressive arts. Charades, duh. That's a simple one that people play. I know working with kids, there's a ton that I think Telestrations is the name of one where you're drawing stuff out. And I know there's one too, I think it's Kadu, that uses sculpture and other forms of art. With this, for example, you could be working on grief with clients. You might start with having clients draw pictures of their emotions independently, but then maybe your clinical goal is to have clients share those feelings. So you might use a game like Telestrations or Pictionary to have clients share those concepts around grief through drawing. And with this, I would definitely say, have them do the independent work first before you have them then share that, because sometimes it can be vulnerable to share those types of feelings. All right. So that was all of those. Finally, let's play our game. So I would like to talk to you now about what is suspension of disbelief. Now, some of you might know what suspension of disbelief is, but bear with me while I describe it. My name is Katerina Koplovovic. I am from Romania, and I'm here today to ask you, do you believe that I am who I say I am? Why? Why not? Would you have believed me if I had spoken this way from the moment you had met me? You might have. How long of me speaking like this way would it take before you got used to it and you forgot that I used to speak a different way a couple of minutes ago? I don't know. Suspension of disbelief temporarily allows oneself to believe something that isn't true, especially in order to enjoy a work of fiction. I'm a songwriter, and I wrote a song that I won't sing the whole thing, because I did and I realized it wasn't all appropriate, or clinically appropriate, I mean. But there's one line that I put in there that, you have to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become? The whole song was about motivation and stuff. And I think it's really important. You have to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become? You have to believe in empathy, love, that you're going to reconcile with your estranged family member. If you don't believe that, how can you make that happen? So our first question here is, suspension of disbelief helps clients by A, providing ways to experience emotions that they normally can't, B, have a unique experience, or C, provide psychological distance. So I'll give you all a moment to either write your answer down or keep it in your head. Suspension of disbelief helps clients by providing ways to experience emotions we normally can't. Suspension of disbelief helps clients by having a unique experience. Suspension of disbelief helps clients by providing psychological distance. The answer is... I was going to fake you out, but you got it right. They're actually all correct. That was a trick question. So suspension of disbelief helps clients to have, and the slides are a little mixed up now. I'm going to speak about a couple of different things together. Suspension of disbelief helps clients to have aesthetic or psychological distance from a subject. So, and I'm going to explain psychological distance in a second. And this is important because, actually, I'm going to explain that first. So if you don't know what aesthetic or psychological distance is, there's kind of similar things, but kind of different. Psychological distance is how far removed you are from, say, your trauma. I have Spider-Man on here because this is one of my favorite memes I found on the internet. Tell me the truth, I'm ready to hear it. And he says, talking about emotions is not the same as feeling them. Which, as a therapist, it frustrates me. Because I'll be working with a client and they'll be like, oh yeah, I was sad today. And I see, yeah, all right, you know that you're sad today, but you still haven't processed that emotion that you were feeling. And then they leave therapy and they're like, I don't feel any better because I just told my therapist I was sad today, but okay, so what? Neurons that fire together wire together. We know this from neuroscience. And I think this is important. So if you're a child and you have a traumatic experience, say your parent is abusive, and you learn that love is conditional, and then your neurons are firing together. Love is conditional, love is conditional. You become an adult and you want to process this, you're going to have to go back, unfortunately, into those neurons that were firing at that time in order to rewire them. You can't just look at it from the outside and say, oh, that looks cool, that was sad, maybe I should rewire that. No, you have to get in the water and learn how to swim again. This is why a lot of the times in therapeutic fields, people say, be careful when you're talking about trauma, because if you don't, once you get in the water, if you don't get back out, you can re-traumatize people. Therapy's hard. So we need to jump in order to unwire these neurons, to have them jump the track, to fire in new patterns to process the trauma. But we don't want to be so far into any sort of traumatic experience that we have clients' prefrontal cortex shut down. If anyone does not know what the prefrontal cortex is, it is this part of your brain up here. And it is, I think humans might be one of the only species to have this. And it's planning, processing, all of those higher functioning things. But if you are in fight or flight and some sort of bear comes out of the woods and is going to eat you, this shuts down because you need the base of your brain to go on to be like, raise your heart rate, make your palms sweaty. We got to run away from that bear. Psychological or aesthetic distance helps to manage this. So you kind of want to lower your client into the water just enough that they are in those neurons and they can see what's going on and manipulate, but not so much that they're like, I'm freaking out now. Suspension of disbelief can help us experience things we might not have before. If you can utilize aesthetic distance, you can pull the camera lens out wide and find ways to look at repressed emotions, for example, or gain emotional intelligence. And that suspension of disbelief can, depending on where the camera lens is, really help you to meter out how close or how far away you are. By providing unique experiences, we may gain insight into our mental health and lives that we wouldn't have otherwise, that can help us see new things in a way that could help us. Obviously, role-playing games, they are a great way to do this because literally you can choose. Am I gonna do a self-insert, play myself in a game? Or am I gonna play something completely different, like a unicorn? Also, elements such as costumes, voice, character traits, life experiences, background, themes in the story, music used, unique experiences, like playing a character you've never played before when I talked about playing the villain. What it is like to be an old man when you're a young girl. All of these elements you can tweak to really pinpoint how close or how far away you're going to get. Witnessing other characters is a step back. So with the autism community and a lot of neurodivergent communities, they have said that one reason why we, because I'm part of the neurodivergent community, like TV is because it's a step removed. We don't have to interact with people because sometimes that's a little too much. But we can watch the social interactions on TV, and that kind of works for us because we're aesthetically distanced, removed a little bit, and we can suspend our disbelief. Also, my fiance played once Menace Among Us, and I barely remember it, but they remember it a lot, and they're like, that was the best game ever. And they were reminding me, for the purposes of this, that you take on roles, and I believe you can also take on villains or heroes, if I remember correctly. Yeah, antagonist or protagonist, yeah. Same thing, Betrayal at House on the Hill. It is random, but someone will be the villain in most of the scenarios. So for someone that might struggle with that, what's that like to be the villain and you're out here with a knife that you found in the floorboards trying to murk people? Also, I don't know too much about narrative therapy, but it interests me, especially the idea of rewriting people's stories. Are there ways to incorporate narrative into a game like Betrayal at House on the Hill to have clients work on reframing personal stories, possibly about being a bad person? I am obsessed with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and if any of you have seen it, and the spinoff Angel, there are a ton of storylines about, I'm a bad person, what does that mean? How do I become a better person despite all these bad things I've done in the past? So I have a short activity. These different clinical interventions are in the wrong order. Oh no! Maybe y'all can help me reorder them. And we're going to do it by a round of applause. So the louder y'all are, the higher on the list these items need to be. Now, I also want to say that I put BoJack Horseman, the TV show, on here and then realized I had never seen it. So I started watching it 2 nights ago. I'm only 2 episodes in. It's a bit much to get through, but I do recommend it. I think it is helpful. All right, so back to, we're going to, by a round of applause, put these in the right order. So I'm going to read them off once, and then we'll do it. We have role-playing an alien with depression. And reminder, this is how close or how far away the psychological distance is. A joke about a depressed blobfish. Role-playing a self-insert with depression. Watching BoJack Horseman TV show. Painting a picture about depression. And playing a game about depression. All right, y'all ready?
Wait, are we starting with like further distance? Or
if you feel that the thing I'm about to read, the whichever one of these dots, if you feel it is closer psychological distance, that means you are going to clap and cheer louder because the emotions are more heightened. All right. So if y'all are ready, how close, by round of applause, is role-playing an alien with depression? All right, sounds medium-ish. All right. How about a joke about a depressed blobfish? How close is that? How about role-playing a self-insert with depression? Watching BoJack Horseman TV show? All right, a little bit. Painting a picture about depression? All right. Playing a board game about depression? All right, y'all did really good. Y'all must be like social workers or therapists or something. So this is the quote-unquote right answer, although you could definitely argue one way or the other. Obviously, depressed blobfish, that is very far away, psychological distance-wise. Watching BoJack Horseman TV show, I put next without having seen it. I don't know, maybe it gets really in-depth. I'll have to finish it. Painting a picture about depression is next. And I'm not sure if playing a game about depression would be next or not. I think it depends on the game, it depends on the picture, it depends on the client. Role-playing an alien with depression is next, and then, of course, self-insert with depression, you're playing that. It's going to be pretty close. You have a question?
Just a comment.
Are you good?
I don't mind. I had a chair. I don't know what things are.
Well, I think one of the things with aesthetic distance might be when you're talking about painting or drawing a picture about depression and playing a game about it, I think it depends on how integral to the design of the theme or the experience of the game the depression is. Like, because we often talk a lot about very front-facing therapeutic games that are kind of in the educational and fun and very boring section, whereas maybe a game that has it as a through line, so it's more of a kind of like a gentle exposure, could be a lessened version of aesthetic distance. So it's more removed, providing more cushion.
Yeah.
So that might be a good way to disseminate that as well. As a thought.
Yeah, that's great. And I also feel like with all of this important, y'all are, I think most of you, I'm going to assume, are some sort of clinician, therapist, social worker. And even if you're not, I'll say this anyway, I think it's important to know yourself and know your clients. I can say all this, but if you don't know who your client is, it's not going to be helpful. Maybe painting a picture about depression is really difficult for this client. Maybe they put a lot of their own personal self into it. You just got to know that and adjust accordingly. So I noticed we are, of course, running out of time so quickly. Level 2. I'm going to kind of speed through some of these. Creating a theme around activities is an easy, creative way to connect different modalities. Very low-hanging fruit. I actually might have to ask you to leave the room, if that's all right with you.
Oh! I
didn't know this.
No.
Well, you can stay because she needs to leave.
Oh.
You can stay because you're part of this. You've seen what we're doing anyway.
Yeah.
It's a training thing.
Yeah, I already explained it. So what she will be doing at some point, we've decided to do Dragons at Tea, just because the thought popped into my head, and then I Googled it, and it's a thing. There's apparently there's a card game, there's a whole book series, I think that was the first one. And I also found Tea Dragons watercolor, which looked interesting. Where am I at on here? Oh, yeah. So basically the idea of just creating a theme, I imagined that, say you have a bunch of neurodivergent autistic clients, I'm thinking of an actual kid that I met who really loved dragons. And it's this idea of people who are outside of the fringes of society identifying with the villains or the monsters or all that sort of thing, because that's what they were made out to be in early turn of the century. But now we're reclaiming it and we're like, yeah, I'm a dragon. But also, like, dragons don't know their own strengths sometimes. And for the purposes of the training that we're doing, it's going to be this idea of the dragons are coming to the human colony and there's tea, and the dragons have to learn how to do social etiquette. Maybe their hands are really big and it's hard for them to hold the tiny little teacups. So this is sort of in the middle with psychological distance. Like, it's kind of clear what these themes are, but also you're not you're a dragon. Speaking of neurodivergent clients, here's our next question. If you are playing a board game to work on perspective taking with a client, you should use role play or use trading and bartering. Anybody just shout out what they think the answer is? Are you sure? Yeah, you're right. Trading and bartering, maybe that could help perspective taking. Perspective taking as in, you might think, well, the other person doesn't want to give me that brick because they need it to build their settlement. Hopefully everyone here has played Settlers. Yeah?
Red and Sanderson. Characters in there with a tradeswoman. And she says every trade deal is by finding what the other person wants, getting that for that.
Good.
So you can absolutely make a trade barter as, maybe take the idea of what I do out of it. What they want.
Exactly. And I think I might, again, know your clients, know if they are at that level. If I had clients that really struggled with perspective taking, I might use role play first. Put them in that character and be like, how does that feel in your body to play a villain? And then maybe if they got good at that skill, then I'd be like, well, now let's trade, and then explain what you said, which was very well articulated. Role playing can help a client gain experiences they might not otherwise, which is, I drew that directly from suspension of disbelief, gaining experiences you might not otherwise. So So if you know who you are, don't look at this slide, just because there's pictures on it. Although I guess I won't give that much away. But extrapolating on this idea, what's appropriate for your clinical goals, consider your client population, you know, what's the diagnosis? Maybe role play isn't good for schizophrenics. I don't know. What's your specific population? Autism, age group, perspective taking. Are you going to be that thing there? Are you gonna color that thing? Are you gonna do pretend play with stuffed animals of this animal, or a puppets show? Also, if you're working with ADHD folks, do they have enough attention span to stay focused on a 3-hour game? I think Lunar Rails is pretty long. I don't know if I'd play that with 8-year-old ADHD kids.
Right? Go 12 hours.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Third question. In what order should you focus when utilizing expressive arts and tabletop games? So we're gonna, in your brain, order which one of these you think should come first. Should you do diagnosis, clinical goals, specific population, or specific modality? I'll give you 10 seconds to think in your brain. So again, you could make some arguments with like all of these about which the order is, but I put them as clinical goals come first, and I think most of us can agree. Clinical goals are first. That's why you make a treatment plan for your clients. Diagnosis second, / maybe specific population. If, you know, you're working with autistic clients, well, that is the population and the diagnosis. And then your specific modality last. But again, really, in my mind, the only thing that, do it first is what are your goals? Focus on goals. Now we're at the hard level. And we have our villain here, who is telling us which one of these is not a great idea to utilize with clients. So is it a good idea to have your Jewish autistic client dress up a role play, a World War II victim, for perspective taking? Is it a good idea to teach meditation to a group of socially awkward 8-year-olds while your co-facilitator teaches a party game to the other group of anxious 8-year-olds in the same room? Is finger painting a good idea? Is a tea party and board games for socializing along with theme musicians and interactive theater improv show and therapy dogs a good idea? So the answer is no, none of these. You died. Thank you for playing. And I did want to explain real quick. Yeah, it's on here. The first one, no, obviously, duh. It's triggering ethnically. What is the psychological distance here that you're using? What are your clinical goals? Autistic people might not want to dress up because of sensory challenges. Know your client. B, age group may not be able to do meditation, plus switch, you're talking about ADHD. Also, I switched anxiety and ADHD. They needed to be the opposite. And not in the same room. Match the method to the goals. C, remember we're doing expressive arts therapies with board games. How would finger painting be incorporated? I put this on here because I was told this in one of my internships because I wanted to do expressive arts, and she was like, well, you can't just do art. You have to have a reason why you're doing the art. And then last one, focus on goals. Are you trying to do too much here? Especially if you're working with anyone with social anxiety. So, you died. Thank you for playing. But we have permadeath, so we get to go back to the beginning. But wait, what about role-playing games? Let's play again and find out. Try again and you will see, no matter how hard you try, you can't defeat me. Tabletop gaming and expressive arts, a winning combination. So in terms of learning goals, there really isn't much different with role-playing games, besides that you can do so much more with role-playing games when it comes to expressive arts. Again, it is dangerous to go alone, so take this. These are therapeutic modalities that utilize role-play. This is not an exhaustive list. I just put a couple on here. There's role-play in drama therapy. There is role-play in internal family systems theory. If you don't know what any of these are, come to me afterwards. I can give you a short little explanation. Gestalt stuff, there's role play. Narrative therapy has role play. Psychodrama, of course, has role play. CBT was the first one that came up. I'm not a fan of CBT, but the internet said it had role play. And there's many, many more than that as well. So we will play this game again. Remember everything that we have learned already today, and let's apply it to role-playing games. So, which one of these would you feel has the most aesthetic distance? A, D&D, B, live-action roleplay, or C, cosplay? So you're saying that as in the most close aesthetic distance. Is that what you're saying, or the farthest? D&D, all right. So I put, maybe we got wires crossed here. I put cosplay as having the farthest away. Now, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'll admit I haven't done a lot of cosplay. I made one furry costume that then got stolen by my roommates. And I dressed up as Link for Halloween once. So I can't really consider myself a cosplayer. But obviously, I think we can agree live-action roleplay typically is closer, aesthetic distance-wise. There's much more opportunity there. And I would really encourage y'all, because I'm tired of playing LARPs and D&Ds where no one role-plays. They role-play. And as a theater geek, we gotta role-play. You can include sewing, obviously costume crafts, writing, somatics, painting, movement, music, ecotherapy, filmmaking. There's so much you can include. One of the best experiences that I ever had with live action roleplay was Vampire the Masquerade with White Wolf. And a good friend of mine and I created Malkavians. If you don't know, are the crazy ones. Of course, I created a crazy one. And we went to Goodwill and we took months to create our costumes and create our characters. And we were from the circus sideshow act, and we had a curio shop, and it was the best experience because we did all that and we got into the characters. And I also went into this knowing that I sucked at social skills and decided that I was going to create a character that is so social. And oh my god, hello, my name is Victoria, don't you want to go to my curio shop? And it blew my mind that I could go up to people and say hello and the world didn't end. Like, and I'm sure there are other people that have had that experience too of, oh, I can't say hello to that person for whatever reason. But if you can roleplay and then you realize nobody cares, really. So slide 42, yeah. All right. Speaking of method acting, so raise your hand if you have any idea what method acting is. Wow. Okay, well then I can... All right, you're a little bit. I can go a little quick on this. Question, did Heath Ledger die from playing the Joker? This is a silly question, probably. The answer is you were right, whatever your answer was. I've heard in the past, they're like, he died because he was method acting and the Joker was a hard role to play. I don't know. I put a bunch of faces up here of people that are involved with method acting in some way or the other. Stanislavski is this guy. He created the Stanislavski method of acting. His work influenced Elia Kazan down here and Lee Strasberg up here. A large part of method acting is emotional identification with a role. So it's close, very, very close aesthetic distance. You have very little aesthetic distance. You are jumping into that role to see what it's like to play the Joker or whoever. So you have to think, how close do you want to be in a roleplay character? How are we on time? We're doing all right on time. Cool. Do you want the entire costume, accent, mannerisms, movement, social setting, physical setting, or set? Do you want to take your 12-year-olds in your role play to a park and have them, I think it's boffing when you have those giant swords? Do you want background music or sounds? Even sights, smells, or tastes? Why not create a whole full medieval banquet for your D&D game to get players in the mood? Like, that'd be fun. That sounds really fun. 44, 45. Again, we are at the hard level. Hopefully we can beat the game this time. Question, when deciding whether to use expressive arts therapies with role-playing games, you should always look at what your favorite activities are and what your client's favorite activities are. True or false? True. True. Clinical concerns come first, obviously, but it definitely helps to do something you enjoy doing. And I put this on here because this is important to me. I worked in a lot of jobs where I was not happy, was not enjoying what I was doing. My last job, I worked with adults as a therapist, and it was cool. But I just recently transitioned to, like I said, family-based, working with kids again, and I almost cried on the way home. This first client that I have, it's a autistic 10-year-old, and we've been doing a lot of paperwork, but I told my co-facilitator, I am going in the backyard with these kids because I needed to build rapport and get to know the kids. It was so fun. It was one of the most fun times I've had in a long time, and all we were doing was throwing a ball over the roof. So know what you enjoy doing, because the more you're enjoying it, the more your clients and the other people you're working with are going to enjoy it. I've heard people say this idea of filling up your own cup. In preschool centers, it's called bucket. Are you a bucket filler? Are you putting hearts in other people's buckets? But I like to add on to that, yeah, all right, if you have nothing in your bucket to give, you have nothing to give, so you're out of energy. But what if your cup or your bucket was nailed down to the table? How are you going to pour the water from your bucket into other people's buckets? Does anybody want to take a stab at how you can get water from your cup nailed down into other people's cups? I've never had anybody get this in the... So you have a cup, and the cup represents your personal energy or your enjoyment for life, and how much water in it is how much you're enjoying life. And you want to help your partner or your friend or whoever around you, but in order to do that, you have to get the water from your cup into their cup, but your cup is nailed down. I'm hearing some interesting answers. Siphoning is interesting, and I heard container too. The answer that I was going to let everyone know is overflow your cup. So if you have all these other cups around you that are smaller, the more you pull into your cup, obviously your cup can only hold so much, but the happier you are, it's going to be contagious. It's going to boil over, and then you just keep pouring into your cup, and it flows over like a fountain, and then all the cups around you are going to be full, and then they overflow, and then there you go. We've reached world peace.
What if you just gave the cup?
But although in this metaphor, it's not a bad idea, but in this metaphor, if you're giving your entire cup away, then you kind of just die because your cup is you, sort of. You might kind of feel a little empty without a cup because you need it to hold the water. So the winners are the clients, yay, and the clinicians come second. Thank you for playing. And I believe the rest of my slides are just notes. There is a, for all you people that think it's important, game resource page. There I listed all the places I got my information from. I did not steal it. Someone else came up with some of this information. Did anybody have any questions? And I ended perfectly on time. We still have half an hour. What? Yeah, I really like Canva. I used to use Prezi all the time, but... Canva's free, and there's watermarks when you download it. And I also went specific. I think I searched for like games, and it popped up this 8-bit stuff, which I thought was very appropriate. You have a question. Of course, you have a question.
Thought that came to my mind. So how would you decide to pick resilience or perseverance?
What do you see as the difference between resiliency and perseverance?
Perseverance, the idea that from my perseverance, keep trying. Resiliency is the ability to be able to maintain a certain state for a certain period of time.
Oh, okay.
Because when things are resilient, they withstand certain things. Trying to think of specific
I think that's a good example, and Googling it too, I see resilience is the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. That's recovering. Perseverance is doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. Those are two different things.
I was just gonna say, in the context of like trying to empower agency, perseverance is like you should just keep trying and trying and trying. And you get this skill.
Right.
In some ways, it's more important like when you're out in the world and you have a setback or you struggle or something like that, like giving them the ability to sort of like stay stable and maintain in the face of that.
Yeah.
In the interest of actually shading the self-plug here, for my later presentation today. One, we, like, with our game, we developed some practice at the same concept of perseverance, resilience, and other different words, we combined them all into grit. Grit.
Grit.
You know, like, I always think of Rooster Copper,
You're right.
old great cowboy, and it's like, it's resilience, it's endurance, perseverance, all of it together in one. I mean, you can split hairs on the meaning of the word, but the value, but the ability, perseverance, resilience, I think you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
They really are pretty.
There's a connection to some degree between all three.
Absolutely.
I also, I don't think I have it here. See if I can remember it correctly. I might be able to get it. Motivation is what you quote. That's not it. There's a difference between, what is it? Motivation, perseverance, and, I can't remember what the quote is. But there's three different kinds, like the ability to want to get off the couch to do the thing, and then the ability to go do it, and then the ability to keep doing it. I can't think of the quote though. If I had the sticker with me.
You could invent one though. I like where you're going.
Is what you yeah. I'm not finding it, but
I feel like what's hard is like in English you're a little bit similar to each other.
Yeah.
I minor of Japanese. I think about one of my favorite things I learned in Japanese is Bodhana, which is like the idea to persevere through anything, which kind of sounds like resiliency and also something great, and also something perseverance. So I think it's like
So what was that word again?
Damaru. That's like the base word conjugated. But it's like a term I think about a lot in my head. I don't like use it all though, because I speak in English and I live in an English-speaking country. But I think it's hard because in English we've adopted so many other words that mean the same thing into our language. I think that's not also, because I think we're all saying the same thing.
Or language is not hard.
Just.
That's okay.
But I think it's like we're all I think running into one of we're all saying the same thing, and it really turns into like the context of using it. Like if my client uses the word resilience,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It's the same thing.
And I was thinking too of a client that I had at my last job, an LGBTQ adult who had a lot of trauma, but was persevering. They were continuing to go because they still had some hope, but they weren't very resilient. They weren't bouncing back very well. They were continuing, but they were hating every moment of it, which maybe is a good example. And I found the quote I was thinking of. Ability is what you're capable of doing. Motivation determines what you do, and attitude determines how well you do it. Which I just absolutely love this, especially when it comes to the neurodivergent community or other disability communities. A lot of people talk about executive functioning or executive dysfunction. And some of these individuals, especially with ADHD, might be called lazy, which I hate that word. It's terrible. Maybe hate's a strong word, but a lot of the neurodivergent community has the ability, we're capable, but I think sometimes motivation is lacking. And again, that might not be quite the right word, as we're saying, sometimes words are the same thing. Attitude determines how well you do it. My fiance's ADHD and doesn't have the motivation sometimes, but will do things for me, but then has a terrible attitude about it because they didn't really want to do it in the first place. It looked like you were at a question.
I was just gonna add like perseverance. Let's say you're talking about something like sports. You have someone who's strong, they want to become better track. They need perseverance. If you have someone that, maybe their body's not as capable, they have challenges, they're small, they need like it's less about them having that perseverance with the trauma. It's more about them having the resilience to when they're getting knocked down. Back up.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
I think it's also like talking about English language, so many words and such similar things, but I also think it's counter from a person's perspective and experiences too. I know a lot of adults who resilience is a trigger word for them because resilience is very much associated with trauma. And I think like, well, yeah, I was resilient, I came through this, but now what? Whereas perseverance, I feel, is a word that we can use for the general population.
Mm.
But in a lot of trauma trainings I've done, and a lot of trauma talks that I've had with other people, resilience can be a trigger word. So I'm at the point now where I would rather hear it because just saying resilience, everybody's like, why are you just expecting about something?
Yeah.
Have you ever had clients
I also work with a younger population, so I don't necessarily say that word as much in therapy. It's just more of the motivation and the positive reinforcement to keep going without like
I think it's an interesting point, because I think we can point out that actually probably more problem in the industry in the sense that we tend to buzzword things.
Mm-hmm.
We create a buzzword, and then it becomes true. I'm so sick of talking about resilience.
Exactly.
Yeah, we stop it. Exactly.
No, fail. All the containers.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember what you were talking about, but the thought that came to my mind was, it sounded very much like trying to get the client to reset, change their mind. It's a mindset, and I've often thought about the idea that if you keep looking at things the same way, you'll get an alternative point of view. If you want to change, there's something that's got to click. And it's like a mindset. You have to look at it. Something has to click so that you look at the world in a slightly different manner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how clinicians like yourself go about doing that. And is that through all the different means that you have, expressive art,
Yeah.
therapies, creative art therapies, whatever it is that you use? How do you feel about that particular idea? Does that come into play in your thought, clients in your work?
I feel like that's kind of that's the question. Like, yeah, how do you get clients to change their mind on something? Especially if it's self-esteem and they're like, oh, I suck, and it's just like an echo chamber. Does anyone have any thoughts to that before I talk on it?
Reframing is what we do a lot with clients. We're not taking away from what they say, but we're trying to get them to see things from a different point of view. And when I think of reframing, the first thing I think of is like in FFT, we use something called a notable intent reframe, which is basically, can you find a way to talk about what the client is talking about only from the positive perspective?
Mm-hmm.
What is achieved? What's the function of the behavior? a good reframe. There are those moments in therapy when you have a good moment. They usually will be like, oh, I've never thought of it that way, or there's something different. So there will be a hard work to help the client. I mean, some of this is maybe psychological distance, where we're talking about being closer or farther from the event that we're talking about. But that's the way it seems to work.
You made me think of a book called The Four Agreements that I just read because my fiance read it and then recommended it. And, oh, my brain stopped. I was going to connect it somehow to reframing things is, that's it. Words have power is what The Four Agreements was talking about. You've heard that other places. But my fiance and I are really committed to trying to improve our communication. And if something happened, we usually say, oh, it's okay. A lot of people say, it's okay, when really it wasn't. So we realized this and we decided, all right, instead, if it's not a big deal, we're going to say, it's not a big deal, which is kind of the same thing as, but it's not the same thing as it's okay when it wasn't. Like, it's not okay that it happened, but it's not a big deal and we can still get over this thing that's happening. And then you mentioned psychological distance again, and something you said reminded me too, that I think sometimes as clinicians or therapists, to answer your question, you can work as hard as you want, but if a client is not ready to change, it's not going to happen. And I'll use a personal example for this. And you also said giving clients experiencing things that they might not have ever experienced before. So my fiance and I are very much a fan of psychedelic psychotherapy. It is not legal in most of America, but we think it should be, especially because people are going to do drugs anyway. Let's make it legal so we can make sure people are doing them safely. But we're also very much into mindfulness and Buddhist philosophy, and we see a lot of parallels in some of the experiences that you can get from both mindfulness and psychedelic psychotherapy. But if we go tell our LGBTQ friends, you want to try yoga and meditation, they're like, no, don't say that when we're talking about triggering words. They'll be like, I just can't meditate. I can't do yoga. Then again, for some of our friends who have tried psychedelics, they'll be like, oh yeah, I love MDMA or whatever. And we're like, well, if you had just tried yoga when I said you could have had another way into this world. But I think, and so my fiance and I sometimes will talk to ourselves like, all right, someday when it becomes legal, we're going to get certified in this. And then maybe do like a bait and switch. Like what we really want is people to do yoga and meditation. But if we can get them to experience that, oh, we're all one in the universe through acid or whatever, and then we can be like, hey, you actually don't need to do that. You could do this breathing technique every day and it'll be healthy and good for you. I mean, obviously clinical concerns with it not being legal yet, but
I was just going to say that something I think is important in perspective that I get perspective taking is that often we have ideas or things we're concerned about. It's really most of the time like our ego, right? Like our sense of some position that we might have, let's say like politics, right? It's like, this is how I vote, and it's how your ego. But something like perspective taking is a way of taking the ego out of it so that it's no longer tied to this sense of identity. You're just talking about issues, and then it's like, oh, well, I guess maybe I do actually be more of a piece.
mm-hmm.
But it's difficult to even see sometimes. Not all the if you have to confront your
Yeah. And another part to the story that I was telling, which I think you're talking about confronting your own sense of identity. I'm a pretty chill person. I don't party or drink that often, but psychedelics, I thought, hey, I'll try this. Worst experience of my life, but I had like the best mental health afterwards. I had like 10 years of therapy in 10 hours. But looking back, what I realize is, like I had mentioned, sometimes you can work with a client so much and work so hard, but if they don't want to change, they don't want to change. And then even me, working on myself, there was still a part of me that was digging its heels and I was like, no, I can't relax. I can't see that the universe is all these things at the one time. So that I think for me, I might have gotten a little too close aesthetic distance-wise than was appropriate. And then if we're talking like parts or internal family systems theory, a bunch of my parts inside were like, the world's on fire, and they couldn't deal with it. Which, side note, do y'all know what internal family systems theory is? I see a lot of head shakes and some. All right. Internal family systems theory is exactly what it says. There's family systems theory, which is we're a family and we relate a certain way. Internally, it's the idea of everyone having parts. So if you've seen the movie Inside Out, that's a really good basic example. You have your happy part and your sad part. Also, a lot of modalities use inner child work, and that's another part, your inner child. I have a librarian in my head that is in charge of everything that goes on in my life. And she has a key to every door, and it's a real struggle because, anytime that I go to try to access one of these other parts, there's that librarian standing at the front door to my brain saying, well, I'm sorry you don't have the right paperwork. And I think internal family systems theories can be very helpful for some of this, especially with role play. What were you going to say?
No, it's just gonna say I don't know if you mentioned earlier, Lion Play series called New Conference, with the characters using the kind of kids on rooms or kids on lights toolkit, but where all the different characters were aspects of the psyche working together.
Cool.
Change a person's mind.
That's great. And I feel like, and this is something I would like to get more into, I've read all the IFST books, but there's trainings you can take. So I'm going to save my money, take the trainings, get certified. I would love to do like that. Get the internal family systems theory knowledge, combine it with like psychodrama also does similar things. And then maybe do a role play where you're like, all right, so Johnny has, or Mary, we'll say, Mary has this librarian part. And have Debbie over here is going to play the librarian part. Like you said, playing all these different aspects of the psyche, and then see, all right, what's that like for Mary to interact in real time with this part of herself. We still have about 15 minutes left.
So, kind of curious to see what you would say about. There's two parts. First part is like, let's say you have a new therapist that wants to get into doing tabletop point of view experiential or a multi-modal kind of approach to therapy. Like, what would be kind of your advice to the things really beyond just what we're talking about first, good things to consider your training experience. And the second part of that would be how do you motivate clients to engage, because like you mentioned, like a role play, or how do you get clients to engage more with the closer dynamics, rather than like I would say, like with clients that I work with, like some that are really distant from the situation that really want to pull us way back, versus how would you approach it?
How do you get people to role play instead of role play?
Just like, and more, I think more in terms of the therapeutic approach. You know, like
Okay.
helping them kind of start to.
What was the first question again?
Just some general ideas of what
Training.
New therapists for training. What would be important.
I'm a big fan of trying to reduce barriers to trainings, but saying that, I would suggest go finding a training and paying for it. Because in the clinical world, well, social work especially, because I'm a master's in social work, they're like, don't practice outside of what you know, which I do think is important. But it's a balance too. So I feel like if you have barriers to actually taking some sort of training, like the Bodhana groups, which I would recommend because I've really been enjoying it. I'm 3/4 of the way through. Go out and play as many of these role plays as you can. Play as a player first. Challenge yourself, because I think most people are their own best experts in some ways. If you know, say you're struggling with social skills like I did, play a character. Use that resiliency and perseverance and bravery. And then at some point, try to DM, even if you suck at it the first time. Play with friends. They're gonna be like, I'm gonna suck at this, but will you humor me? Likely after 2 sessions, no one will be able to find a time to come together to play anyway. So, which has been my experience. And then your second one was how to get people to engage more. That's a very good question. I think when I've been playing it with friends, I feel like I don't have a lot of agency to get people to do the things that I want because they're your friend. I think as a clinician, you might have a little more ability. But I'm a big fan of letting things be client driven. Because, like I said, even when I was trying to work on my own mental health, I pushed myself too far, and then I was like, same thing is going to happen with a client. Maybe just having frank conversations with the client and saying, hey, here's your goal, and we're a team, and you're in charge of this, you're leading this. You know, a lot of servant leadership or boosting them up from the bottom. How do you want to achieve this goal? And then saying, hey, I've noticed that, maybe even explaining the difference between role play and role play so that they understand. So then later, like 3 months after, you can say, hey, it seems like you're more role playing. Why is that? Get their opinion on it. And if you're able to pinpoint, like you could even go make specific tiny little goals of, oh, you've told me that you're actually kind of really embarrassed. You're worried that people are going to judge you when you put on an accent or you act. That's valid. How about we come up with like 2 simple little goals, like you're gonna speak as the character, even if you don't put an accent. Say, I am Korgor and I will kill you now, as opposed to Korgor goes and kills the person. Mapping out like all those different little steps to see, all right, we're here, but we want to get there. Does that help answer your question? Cool.
Yeah, I like to try to give the kids helping build something LGBTQI plus folks. And I created with them this almost like LGBTQ utopia where that's just so accepted. It isn't really an issue in the game. That it's almost like trying to save that world, trying to keep it afloat. It becomes sort of the objective, and there's a lot of buy-in to say, you know, I like the idea of this place, I like this world, I like this place my characters are living in. I want to beat the bad guys because I want this to be a place that's safe for people like me. And that's been really, really cool to see how effective kids have been in that situation.
I think that's a really great point, and it reminds me on like safety as a big thing. And going back to what I was talking about, themes, I mean, we can't deny that all of us are often working from our brain stems, and that's all safety. And I think we kind of forget that we're going through our lives looking for, okay, what's safe? Where's the exit? Or especially if you're a marginalized individual. But if you're giving them things that they like, buy-in, that makes it so much easier.
I was going to say, like in the context of role-playing games, which I know I'm more of a game side than a therapist, but, you know, there's session 0, right, which is like before you play the game, you kind of elaborate on the themes and the kind of context of the game. I mentioned earlier Kids on Bridge, which is a very good game, but in the very beginning, the first thing you do, the kids come up with the school that they are going to have.
Mm-hmm.
So like you build the things you expect. And the other thing is we're generating plan. We are in the session. And I don't know if this is but like if the players walk into a rhythm instead of saying you see X, Y, and Z. Say, guys, you're hard. Like you see something or you describe it. They describe one thing. And you fit that thing into the world that you need.
Yeah. We have about 9 minutes. Another question.
To address the gentleman over here in the red. I understood what you were talking about with respect to the game area, incorporating game therapy. A long time, more game player, I'm not a clinician, so throw a suggestion. I find that the best way for a person to know whether or not they would enjoy playing a game. It's not by making rules. It's not by making rules.
human experience, emotion, interaction that comes from playing that game. None of the critical thinking, none of the frustration of being behind, none of the elation of being ahead, none of the confusion as to, oh my gosh, what do I do next? Okay? And when you think about it, this game, you have all these different things you can do in the game. You have to learn how to do it. Playing, if you want to do the board gaming thing, play some board games, play some card games, play some dexterity games to get a sense of how you feel when you play it. And that would give you some idea of how the client might feel about doing that. And with role playing, it's the same thing. It takes a little bit more time because you have to set up the environment. Games that take place, and you got the characters and everything. And as Mary had mentioned earlier, I don't know how many people caught this, but it's role playing versus role playing. And it's ROLE
Yeah.
versus ROLL. And in my experience, I've always had trouble playing that game because it's always ROL. Roll the dice. Oh yeah, well, my character's going to do this. No, that's not role playing. Role playing is immersing yourself as a character, as she said. And it's that
Psychological distance.
psychological distance.
So the question then is, how do you help them engage more with the therapy?
I'm going to go out on a limb here again. Not a mission, but that's what I intended. It's just here, all of you say. You've got to know your client.
Yeah.
What is going to trigger that client? And that might be hard to find.
And just one more quick thing. Bodhana training, I think that's an excellent concrete example of how for students.
In the last couple of minutes, I did have a couple other. I just want to give y'all as many ideas as possible because maybe something will hit on your brain. You're like, "Ooh, I want to try that." And I just have a basic list here: music and sound. I put the sound game in quotation marks, although now I don't remember what that was. I probably Googled the sound game and something came up. So Google it, I guess. Like I said, theme can be a big one. Incorporate theme music. You've seen people do that in Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, but see if you can think outside of the box of other ways to incorporate music. There's also, see if I can remember this, diegetic and the other one. I think diegetic music is when it's in a film and it's in the film, and it's like they have a radio playing in the background. But then the other one, which I forget the name of, is if it's like not in the world of the film. And you can play around with that. Also, that kind of plays around with breaking the fourth wall and aesthetic distance. Movement. Places, already mentioned about movement. Large pieces for OT. Theater drama, playing party games, obviously. Trading communication games. Can you communicate without spoken language if you're playing, say, Settlers? How does that change the challenge of communication in a game? If you're just gesturing or like, meh, I want a sheep for a wood or something. Also, playing board games in character, I thought would be a really cool idea. Maybe I'm a woodsman and I have my wood in Settlers. And writing is another expressive arts, writing in poems, journaling about your experiences, rewriting rules, writing to communicate in trading games.
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I'll...
I was going to say, one of the things that we're trying that I was thinking about is you're having people build their character rather than starting with say a class or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They just have like it's just
That's great. Yeah.
look at that. How does this fit
For filmmaking, people do reviews of games online. So that could be farther away, aesthetic distance of, you like this game, let's talk about it on YouTube. Or making an actual film, you're in your role-play game and you're like, we're gonna be Krogarth and his wife on film. Art therapy. There are art therapy games. You can make your own board game. I tried to do that as a kid. It didn't turn out very well, but theme, again, is a big one. You incorporate themed art activities before or after. Also, for somatics, an idea there is noticing emotions and how your body is feeling while you're playing a social game. You might also be able to, and I've heard this in the training a lot, breaking the fourth wall if you're playing a role-playing game and you're noticing it's getting heated, and breaking the fourth wall, instead of saying Krogarth, you say Doug, who's playing Krogarth. Doug, I noticed that Krogarth is feeling really upset right now. And that specific thing right there is pulling back that lens to be like, oh, I see you're getting a little too far in those neurons there. Why don't we take a step back so that you don't shut down your prefrontal cortex? Animal therapy is one that I didn't really mention much. Again, think outside of the box. What are ways that you could incorporate animals in games? I couldn't think of much besides animals can be around in the space while you're playing the board game. Good for comfort and stress reduction. Ecotherapy, play games outside, play games about nature. Can you play games with natural pieces? Yeah.
There was a LARP years ago.
Oh, cool.
Where there was this, there was a LARP experience, and the goats were an element of the story in that you could interact with the goats as part of the fun.
There you go. Yeah, there's goat yoga. Which I took an expressive arts therapy and an equine assisted therapy class over the summer at a farm. I don't like goats anymore because they have giant horns and they're jerks, yeah. And it butted me in the butt, and that really freaking hurt. I did not know a goat could be that. And then actually later that week, I got bucked from a horse, which, yeah, that hurt. It actually didn't hurt as much as when the goat got me. But thank you everyone for attending. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll be presenting again tomorrow at 9.